Ryan. I work at LogDNA as a systems architect, focused mostly around infrastructure and deploying a lot of the things that Eric and Jonah talked about. It's really cool to see all this come together. Been here 4 years or so, and we used to be 4 folks in a little real estate office, and now we've grown to hundreds plus, and it's really cool to see sort of the maturation process and such. So I'm going to talk today about use cases around how we use Sysdig and AWS to power our modern log management platform. So away we go. Let's see. So let me tell you a little bit about LogDNA. So as you can probably guess from the name, we focus on logs. The DNA bit has nothing to do with actual biology DNA. I joke that it stands for data and analytics, but it's just a fun name. One of the things that we do and we're passionate about is empowering both DevOps as well as developers of applications and teams to get insights from their logs. So not just the what's happening, but also why is it happening and what order did it happen, and getting to those sort of conclusions faster, much like Sysdig talked about getting to the bottom of security and performance. We try to do the same thing with logs, but to do so, we chose Kubernetes as our sort of primary framework for hosting all of our applications. So our entire stack is built on Kubernetes. We chose it primarily because it's consistent, YAML files, configuration as code, all that fun stuff, as well as scalable. You can use horizontal pod autoscalers. You can scale up stuff manually. There's lots of fun things you can do, but it's highly repeatable, highly scalable. And one thing that we found as well is that as Kubernetes has matured over the years, more and more folks want Kubernetes logging, and ourselves included. And so we've sort of become an expert in Kubernetes logging simply by experience in using it. Our customers use it. Something I want to say at least over half of our logs come from Kubernetes customers, ourselves, everyone. And so it's a really big space to be in. Talk a little bit more about how we actually use Kubernetes on AWS. So this is a diagram of how our infrastructure is hosted on EKS. There's a number of different parts here. This box right here represents the actual EKS cluster, and everything inside here are kind of categories of applications that help power our stack. Arrows going in and out of the box are things that are external to the cluster. So for example, the LogDNA agent, this can be deployed as a binary on a Linux system, or like most folks, be deployed as a daemon set for in your EKS cluster, for example, and then it will forward those logs to our ingestion API. We do some processing here. Logs get stored, logs get exported to customer archives. For example, they want to host export their archives in AWS S3 for, maybe they happen to meet audit or compliance requirements, and so the usual 7, 14, or 30 days on LogDNA isn't enough, and so we automatically export those logs to their bucket. So it's pretty useful stuff. Logs are stored in the long-term data store, and we also allow the sort of live streaming of logs into the web UI. So when an end user goes and logs into the web portal, they're able to, when they do a search, or if they just want to look at all their logs, logs will simultaneously come from the data store as well as stream in live straight from the processing pipeline here with these worker nodes. So that's the setup we have, and it's fairly, it's fairly simplified in this diagram. There's a lot of applications running, and like Jonah and Eric mentioned, microservices sort of make things a lot more interesting. You have a lot of things running at the same time, and for us, we really enjoy the fact that EKS is a managed service. It allows us to not have to focus on managing the EKS masters, those sorts of things, and we can just do what we do best, which is kind of running our application stack in Kubernetes. So that's been really great. We use Terraform to configure the EKS cluster, and then from there you could use basically the Kubernetes interface like we would normally. So the next bit really I want to talk about is how Sysdig kind of comes into the picture here with monitoring and metrics, and helps sort of get us insights into what's going on in our infrastructure. So this similar diagram you saw before, but now it's got the wonderful Sysdig shovel icon. This really represents the Sysdig agent. So the Sysdig agent, similar to the LogDNA agent, is a daemon set. It gets deployed into the cluster, into your EKS cluster. It's really, really simple. Just kind of put in some configuration and deploy the daemon set, and you're good to go. And all of these metrics will then be sort of shipped to Sysdig, and you can see them in this wonderful UI. And it's not just regular performance metrics or application metrics that you can see, but you can also see, like Eric mentioned, insights around security as well. So that include privilege escalation in a shell. That can include a lot of different things. And I'm going to dive into each of those use cases with a little blown up screenshot in the next slide. So talking a little about use cases sort of partitioned into sort of different stages of the development lifecycle. So the first stage, looking at development itself, and like Eric mentioned, one of the really cool features of Sysdig Secure is not just the fact that it scans container images, but it does so continuously, and it alerts you when there is a problem. So you're like, oh, there's a vulnerability in this version of Lodash, for example. You should probably do something about it before it goes to production. And that's the kind of thing that proactive notification that really helps our developers go, oh, well, I guess I should fix that right before it goes anywhere. You're not, it hasn't gone through a ton of QA, it hasn't gone through a ton of effort to get it out to release. Almost immediately after your CI or CD pipeline builds that image and ships it to the container registry. And so that's really cool. Happens all the time. Like every time you update a dependency, there's obviously a risk of there being a vulnerability, these sorts of things, or if you don't update, for example. So we use this all the time in development. In production, there's some even more cool things that can happen here. Like I sort of alluded to earlier, on the security side of Sysdig Secure, you can not only see and audit all of the different sort of connections made to containers. So for example, if you exec into a container shell and you start executing commands, it'll record that session for you. It'll alert you, so you can proactively know immediately what's happening. I mean, even when it's something like as innocuous as an SRE going in and doing something to help resolve an incident, you can at least know it's happening, which is really cool. I'm not sure how many folks know this, but if you have access to a privileged container with the right settings, you can access and change the underlying node's OS and aspects of it. So it's really important that you monitor this. Containers aren't just free; they're not just magically secure. You do have to monitor yourself, and we use Sysdig for this purpose. And so it's pretty cool to see that proactive notification around those things. The other thing that I tend to be more immersed in is the performance side. So getting metrics around, in this case, in this tiny screenshot here, which we'll blow up on the next slide, is my Elasticsearch dashboard. I can see lots of different metrics around Elasticsearch. They're kind of gathered using the same sort of Prometheus API setup that you'd see with just regular Sysdig metrics around networking, CPU, all that stuff. But this is one of the cool things about Sysdig is not only can you set up dashboards kind of custom tailored to whatever you're looking at, you can see alerts overlaid onto those bad dashboards to see if there's a correlation with your recent alerts. And we'll go in a little more detail that in the next slide. But this is something that I use all the time, anywhere for networking issues, CPU contention, memory, even just like, oh, too many pending tasks in Elasticsearch, I can know there. So it's all in one place, and it's super wonderful for us to use. We hook it up to PagerDuty. Pages are SREs when there's a problem. There's no end to all the things you can do. But I want to dive in a little bit more. Hopefully you guys can actually see these screenshots a little more clearly now. And on the left here, we have a dashboard around Elasticsearch, so kind of performance metrics. And on the right, we have policy events as they would appear in Sysdig Secure. So these are two slightly different products in Sysdig, but overall, they're still used to contribute towards observability. And so this particular Elasticsearch dashboard, I can go through a little bit of it, has a bunch of different parts here. And I don't know how many folks are familiar with Elasticsearch, but one of the more interesting graphs is this pending task graph. You can see it kind of spikes a little bit and comes back down, little spikes. And pending tasks just represent, in this particular case, sort of events that are being processed by the cluster or in a queue to be processed, right? And so if you see a giant spike, you might want to know about it, right? And so you can see, over time when alerts went out, it doesn't appear to be any correlation in this particular case, but if there was, you could go, maybe there's a problem here, I should go investigate further, right? Same thing like HTTP errors by pod related, and this is specific to Elasticsearch pods, for example. You're like, I don't see any real correlation, but maybe there's some errors here that I should look into. And it keeps going all the way down. I can, I even have a summary here as to see, okay, is there a yellow cluster, green cluster, red cluster? How many shards are there? You can color code it based on thresholds. This is just one of the many things that you could do here. We've had interesting issues tracking down, for example, TCP errors between external load balancers and our pods that sort of receive that traffic on their end. And this has been instrumental in figuring out where that problem was. We've seen things like CPU contention, where on the underlying node, there was no high CPU, but we saw performance issues for pods running on it. But when we looked closer, the load was sky high, for example. And so we were able to get those sorts of insights just by having these dashboards and pivoting on those pieces of information. And a lot of these things are collected by default by Sysdig, which is really cool. With Elasticsearch, we had to turn some stuff on, but for the majority of the metrics that we have, we don't have to do much at all. It's already there. We just have to make the dashboards that we want. And even then, they have canned ones, which is actually really cool. On the right here, I'm going to kind of switch gears to security. I'm not as immersed in security, just to be upfront, as some of like the security engineers on our team. But it's really cool what you can do here. In addition to seeing and alerting upon access, you can also put custom policies in place that will do things. You can capture specific information about what's going on, and you can see down here that image scanning tab that I talked about prior. You can even see results all summarized there as well. This is all sorted by namespace here, and it's all nicely organized. You get all sorts of information: the host node, the pod, anything you'd ever want to know about the policy event is logged and auditable. And our security team very much appreciates having this in place, especially around compliance and audits and things like that. And so the fact that this is immediately compatible with Kubernetes is one of the big draws for us, because to be frank, a lot of security around Kubernetes is new. It's kind of hard to grapple with at first, and so this is a tool that we use to help with a lot of that. I also wanted to mention that on the left here, that there are sort of a way to capture like TCP style information. Should there be a targeted sort of area you want to look at, connections being made, things happening, events, those sorts of things that we've used on occasion as well to debug a little bit harder issues to track down. So as you can tell, I can probably talk for days about all the different use cases we have for Sysdig and EKS, but at the end of the day, it helps us deliver a lot of value. And I want to talk about kind of sort of recapping as to what those types of values are. So I want to talk about outcomes. Sysdig allows us to sort of monitor and alert on AWS infrastructure events, and not just infrastructure events specifically, but also on application events, for example, to some degree. So metrics that applications emit on, performance, on a lot of different things. And it's really, really useful for us to not just know about something that's happening, but also have proper instrumentation and metrics around those. Like I mentioned earlier, dashboards for visualizing things. We're able to detect anomalies pretty quickly and get alerted on them. It's been super valuable for not just us, but also our end customers, because we get those alerts quickly. We pinpoint the cause of, for example, in this case, resource contention, or maybe it's a security concern pinpointed as just somebody, resolving an incident in some way. Like lots of really quick turnaround times as a result of having this implemented this way. And in general, the value to our business is that at the end of the day, anything we're doing, we're trying to enable a better customer experience. So with Sysdig, we're able to resolve incidents faster, we're able to get insights faster, we're able to tell when there are performance problems faster. And so as a result, we're able to deliver a consistent and better customer experience than we otherwise would be able to. So that's.
I want to go over our next steps slide here, where you can learn more about containers on AWS. You can learn more about Sysdig and the partnership they have with AWS and how easy it is to deploy through the marketplace and other ways. Or you can sign up for a free AWS to get started launching stuff or get your startup off the ground. And thanks for tuning in today.